Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down our most favorite sleepers ahead of the 2025 season and also football in the air. We are recording this on Thursday afternoon. Lions-Chargers squaring off in the Hall of Fame game. We actually have Omarion Hampton and some of the key players out there. What a time to be alive. But again, sleeper is going to be the main topic today. And accordingly, I am joined by two of Fantasy Life's finest. We got the projection masters back in the house, Dwain the Rock McFarland, Matthew Freedman, a.k.a. the Oracle. Fellas, football's back. Dwain, how much money do you have down? 1,000, 50,000? What are we thinking here?
I have nothing down on the Hall of Fame game tonight. Like I'm being a complete wet blanket. I'm opting out. But I did hear you and Freedman talking before the show. Freedman is a much sharper better than me. So maybe I'll get something down and I'll just follow along with Freedman.
Freedman, you were saying before the show you've never felt better about the Chargers tonight than any bet you've ever made.
That's not what I said. I have very little information, and I'm still going to be betting on the Chargers because football's back, and you just got to scratch that itch.
Freedman's lock. You guys heard it here. Los Angeles Chargers. What could go wrong? Again, guys, plenty of sleeper talk ahead. That said, I wanted to start things off with our DraftKings opening lines, remembering some of the biggest preseason training camp hype jobs that maybe didn't go exactly the way we expected. Football's in the air. Training camp highlights are cool and fun. Dwain and I were actually drafting last night, and I was trying to just be clear about that, okay? My one issue is when we do see guys literally being covered by coaches, okay? Can we please just not post those highlights? Otherwise, football, I love it. You love it. Let's embrace it. That said, guys, we've all been alive long enough and in this business long enough to know that for every single Jacory Krosky Merritt who becomes a future Hall of Famer, there are a lot of duds along the way. So just wanted to take some time to remember maybe some players who, again, really had the fantasy community and especially us all kinds of hype throughout August, but it didn't exactly work out when it came time to really get real in September and beyond. So Dwain, who is a player that, again, had you feeling nicey in the August months, but not so much afterwards?
Yeah, I'm going to take you back, Ian. It's the year 2019. Kareem Hunt has been suspended coming off of a 1,300-yard season. We're talking about Andy Reid, where we had Westbrook, McCoy, Deuce Staley, even back in the day. Charles. This guy was known as the Jamal Charles, the running back whisperer, right? If you have Andy Reid's running back, unless your name's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like you're going to be this amazing player. So what happens is we get Kareem Hunt. He's suspended. And Damian Williams is the next guy up on the roster. And then behind him, we have Darrell Williams. But they drafted this guy in round 6 of the NFL draft, and his name was Darwin Thompson. Darwin Thompson, I remember in high-stakes drafts, by the time we got to September, late August, this dude was going in round 7 or 6 of drafts. Do you want to know how many attempts he had that year? He had 37 for 128 yards. And he did score a touchdown, and he had 9 receptions for 43 yards. Like, I honestly cannot recall ever a hype train that went as crazy as the Darwin Thompson thing. Now, obviously, there were multiple layers to that, a suspension, a kind of weak depth chart. Also, Damian Williams was dealing with a hamstring injury throughout training camp that kind of was nagging him. So there was the question of injury to the next guy, not really good players in front of him, and this guy looking really flashy against coaches, and in training camp videos, Ian. And he literally went to the moon. Unfortunately, he was not able to stick the landing. He missed it right past the orbit. Darwin Thompson floating out there in space somewhere, a pick a lot of people would like to have back.
One of really many Chiefs running backs that unfortunately has just caused one headache after another for, fantasy managers, really ever since, the initial Kareem Hunt era was over in Kansas City. There's been a few good times here and there, but Darwin Thompson, nice pull by you, Mr. Dwain. Freedman, who's someone that, again, maybe didn't exactly meet expectations after a big August.
Honestly, we talked about this before the show, and I'm like, I struggle to remember my mistakes. It's not that I don't make them. It's just I block them out like a moron because I can't survive if I remember my mistakes. But I wouldn't even say it's a big August. But I just remember like Christian Michael entering the league as this second rounder who was just absolutely like the physical specimen, like elite on the spark stuff. And I was just thinking like he's going to be awesome in this backfield in Seattle, and did absolutely nothing. And then I made a similar mistake years later with Rashad Penny, except he was a first rounder. And I'm like, oh man, this guy was so great in college. And then he got beat out by, I think, a 7th rounder in Chris Carson. And then I wouldn't say I on the Keyshawn Vaughn train, but just like, oh, he's just absolutely going to smoke Ronald Jones, and Keyshawn Vaughn did nothing. One that really stands out to me, and I wouldn't say he really had a big August as a rookie. Like, I remember thinking after what he did at Texas Tech, immediately going to be an awesome NFL player. And then he didn't play for the first 6 weeks. And then he had only 600 yards as a rookie. And I'm not saying like I'm getting Marvin Harrison vibes a little bit, but I feel like people will look at Crabtree and be like, he ended up having an okay career, but like so much was expected of him. It feels like maybe that's the type of career that Marvin Harrison will have, where he's like in the NFL for 10 years. He never ends up becoming a superstar, but it's like he had a couple 1,000-yard seasons. But like Crabtree, just thinking about hype and then someone who like didn't deliver and like it hurt my heart. Like Crabtree is at the peak of it.
Literally has a good case for maybe the best college wide receiver of the 21st century so far. Obviously had that iconic, game-winning touchdown against Texas. Fun NFL moments as well. Had the whole rivalry with Aqib Talib, many good years, 49ers, several different teams, along the way. So do like that poll, Freedman. I'm going to go with someone that was nowhere near as productive as Michael Crabtree, but still to this day holds a very special spot in my heart. Auden Tate, a.k.a. the 2019 Cincinnati Bengals training camp offensive MVP, guys. I hope he has that hardware still sitting out there somewhere in his Cincinnati residence. But man, I am just a sucker for these physical 6'4", 6'5" wide receivers who turn 50-50 contested catches into 70-30 propositions. And that's what this dude was doing really throughout the entire preseason training camp and even briefly, guys, into that 2019 season. Had 575 yards in just 12 games. There is a simulation of our world out there where it's Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Auden Tate to this day catching dimes from Joe Burrow. Unfortunately, that is not the world we live in. So Auden Tate, just a shame that we didn't get better coaching. I'm never, ever going to blame him for a single thing because, my God, that guy must have never lost a game of 500 growing up. And for that, we thank you, Mr. Tate. So good stuff, fellas. I hope everyone enjoys the Hall of Fame game. We'll continue to enjoy the training camp highlights along the way. And again, this has been our DraftKings opening lines. Listen up, baseball fans. Another epic night of baseball is on deck, and it is time to swing for the fences with my partners at DraftKings Pick 6. Right now, brand new customers who play just $5 on their first pick set will get $50 in bonus picks. Here's how to join in on the action. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, sign up using my code FANTASYLIFE, choose 2 or more MLB studs, and call more or less on stat lines like will they hit a home run, get 2 or more hits, or strike out 7+ batters. Lock them in, sweat every at-bat, and battle for your share of huge cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app today. Register with my code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Fun times taking a trip down memory lane, but time to get our minds right for these 2025 fantasy football drafts. I know all of you are starting to get back into the swing of things with August here. So again, we are here today to give you our favorite sleepers at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and of course, tight end. And we are defining sleepers as going outside the top 120 picks on Yahoo, ESPN, Sleeper, CBS, basically any of the traditional redraft sites, consensus ranking there. So again, outside the top 10 rounds, I do feel like that constitutes a good sleeper, not trying to be that guy who's pulling out a round 7 pick or DeAndre Swift or, Caleb Williams or someone like that. We're trying to actually give you some people that might have you saying, oh, that's gross, but wait, we have some news for you. Maybe it's not quite as bad as you thought. So Dwain, with all that said, start us off with a pretty trendy, I would say late round quarterback pick. That said, just based on this ADP, man, he really does qualify as a late round pick.
Yeah, and if I'm looking for a player at quarterback that I want to consider for sleeper, I'm really looking for someone that I think gives us some of that dual threat ability. Now, it might not be on the same level as like a Jaden Daniels or a Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, the elite guys, but kind of that next layer down, right? Could they run for 500 yards? And if they get hot as a passer and throw for 4,000 and throw 30, 35 touchdowns, I mean, you're talking about a top 5 season could unfold. And Drake May is the name I want to talk about here, Ian. So if you look at him last year, on the surface, doesn't look real good. 208 passing yards per game. The average for an NFL starter last year was 215. But if you dig a little deeper, there were some games that he left, some games that he came in to take over as the starter. So if we just isolate down to the games where he played at least 90% of the snaps. So he was basically a starter from beginning to end of the game. He actually averaged 235 passing yards per game, with 37 rushing yards in those games. He averaged 17.1 fantasy points. Obviously not a lot of passing touchdown production because he had no one to throw to. So you go out, you had Stephon Diggs coming off that midseason ACL, but all the reports are positive there. Not like we're in love with Diggs, but man, he could be a chain mover. He can help you keep the offense going. Then you had Kyle Williams in round 3. Maybe he's a guy that can come in and give you a little bit more explosiveness down the field, work him in the slot, do some different things like that. Obviously, we've got Josh McDaniels back, and that means Pop Douglas should be in for a decent line of work as well from the slot. But the other big one, man, that I like is the addition of Trevion Henderson. And that gives you an opportunity for some easy big plays in the pass game. Scheme up Trevion around the line of scrimmage, guys. I know you've seen the clips. He's probably going to run 3 wheel routes like that all season. Okay, I know it's really great. And I think that's actually one of the ones Ian's talking about where a coach is trying to cover Trevion Henderson on a wheel route. Like, it's just not happening. Like, he's too fast. But the point stands, right? We have added some playmakers here. Now, there's some unknowns about them. But the beauty of it is last year, Drake May, an 11% scramble rate, Ian, that was second in the NFL. Now, he has come out and actively talked about wanting to run the ball less. Part of it last year is you scramble out of the play, and if you're a guy like May, you're looking down the field to make a play, and you're like, well, crap, there's no one open. I guess I'll just run. So I think the scrambles could come down a little bit because the receiving core does improve, but I think we get enough of a bump as a passer. And I think the other untapped area here, and man, I've been researching it. I know there was a quote early on. Haven't heard much more about it at training camp. If you guys have heard it, feel free to send it to me on Twitter, DM me. But man, this is a guy that in college he was very involved in the design run game, right? He handled 14% of his team's design rushing attempts in college. Last year, that was 3% for the Patriots. So even if they got that to like 9 or 10%, guys, the NFL average is like 6 or 7%. So if we could just get Drake May to that number, picks up a few extra touchdowns on the ground as well, Ian, I think that's kind of the path. Better receiving core. We get more production from in the passing game. Maybe scrambles come down a little bit, but you still get 400, 450 rushing yards. I think there's a lot of ways for Drake May to end up inside the top 8. And to your point right now, pick 132 in consensus ADP. So for those of you trying to count that up at home, you're getting him in round 11 or 12 of your fantasy draft.
Most design QB rushes in a single season over the past decade actually does go to 2020 Cam Newton, who was coached by Josh McDaniels, now Drake May's coach. Drake May, Cam Newton, they're pretty much the exact same person, guys. I kid. But as much as, Drake May did say that maybe he does want to run a little bit less, keep his eyes downfield more, Dwain, he also came out today and said when it's third down or near the end zone, I'm 6'5", 230 pounds, go get something. So again, he's kind of had this wild child in him ever since those days in college. My comp for him coming out was Justin Herbert if he shotgunned a 2-liter of Mountain Dew every single game. So I do think there's potential for him to, again, be someone who, yes, is going to be picking up those rushing yards, maybe not in the manner of like a late round Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson, but hey, 80, 90 rush attempts going to go a very long way relative to the usual pocket passers that you have going that late in drafts. Freedman, you're on the same wavelength here, and I will say when Dwain and I were doing our first real-time sports draft last night that you guys will be able to find on Saturday on our YouTube channel, this was a player who we were talking about just being the perfect second quarterback in far more Bills than not. So Freedman, talk about your favorite quarterback sleeper, Mr. Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, first I want to give just a glimpse behind the scenes here. Ian was like, hey guys, let's do sleepers. And immediately he had his 4 picks in there. And then Dwain, shortly after that, had his 4 picks in there. So I just want to say, it's not that Anthony Richardson is not a sleeper of mine, but I would have gone with either of their picks over Anthony Richardson. That said, Anthony Richardson is the cheapest. Yeah, it does suck to suck, but Anthony Richardson is the cheapest of these quarterbacks, and he actually might have the highest ceiling. Now, the question is Anthony Richardson actually going to start the season for the Colts? And if he becomes a starter, does he keep the job? And we don't know, but he has to beat out Daniel Jones, which, let's say, is not like that high of a hurdle to jump over. And I mean, camp reports, whatever, who knows how valuable they actually are. But Zach Kiefer is one of the better beat reporters who follows the Colts. And he has said that Richardson so far is outplaying Daniel Jones in practice. Again, this is something we have to monitor. Like, who knows if Daniel Jones actually is able to beat out Anthony Richardson, how this ends up flowing. But if Richardson is the starter, we have seen him have, top 10 upside easily as a runner. And then the question is, can he mature some as a passer? He's got fantastic weapons around him. I mean, I wouldn't say like the best skill position group in the league, but 3, maybe even 4, if Adonai Mitchell can develop 4 solid wide receivers around him, a good playmaking tight end, and then Jonathan Taylor to help take some of the pressure off of the offense. So Anthony Richardson, with his rushing ability and given how cheap he is, going as the QB 28 right now in our consensus ADP tool that everyone should check out, use the promo code Freedman, nailed it for 20% off. Be sure to check that out. But a guy who's just so cheap and has such a, I want to start taking some stabs on him, given that there have been positive reports on him in training camp.
Again, Dwain, in our draft last night, we managed to come away with Jalen Hurts in round 4, okay? And we just had such a problem getting really any meaningful running back that we were using our late round picks there. Didn't even feel like we needed a second quarterback. But we were talking, man, if you don't get one of those elite quarterbacks, one of the top 5 dudes out there, yes, you're going to want someone before Anthony Richardson, obviously. But, man, number 2 quarterback on that roster, why not get Richardson? You can get him at the very end of these drafts, and he is someone where maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe Daniel Jones wins the job. Just cut him and get another running back at that point.
Yeah, especially in redraft leagues. I think it's a little bit tougher whenever you're playing, in best ball leagues where you don't know how long you're going to have him. Not saying you can't take him, but in a redraft league, you can absolutely just cut him and you don't have to worry about it. The bottom line is when we've seen Anthony Richardson on the field, yes, he's been terrible as a passer, but he does give us that rushing floor, which can turn into rushing upside if suddenly he does improve as a passer, which all reports out of camp so far. And again, who knows how much we can trust those things? We'll see what it looks like when we see some preseason action, but there has been improvement. And to Freedman's point, I will say this with Richardson, this is a good receiving core. Like, is it elite? No, but like Michael Pittman is a good possession receiver. Josh Downs is a wide receiver one in some offenses that no one knows about. Now you add Tyler Warren to the mix, who's an absolute beast after the catch. You can just get him the ball right away in space. And then you have Alec Pierce. You also have, if you look back to last year, Adonai Mitchell. He can rotate in. Not saying all these guys are superstars, but that's a pretty good room overall. I think it's better than quite a few other NFL teams. So I do think there's some upside in the passing game if Mr. Richardson can get right.
I'm going to be rolling with someone who will not be running quite as much as either Drake May or Anthony Richardson, but I do think could make up for it through the air. Give me J.J. McCarthy. Shout out Thor Nystrom, who at this point might as well be leader of the J.J. fan club. And look, with McCarthy, it's a bet on one, his talent. We do have the Athletics' Dane Brugler on record saying that McCarthy would have been his highest rated quarterback in the 2025 class here. And also just this offense, guys. I was actually trying to go through basically every NFL team in my head and say, okay, if we just had a neutral quarterback, if one of us for some reason had to go play quarterback for a franchise, what combination of a coach, offensive line, and playmakers would actually bring out the best in us? I think Minnesota is very near the top. You can give it to Philly probably just with the O-line, AJB and Devontae, and you can just hand the ball off to Saquon. That'd be pretty awesome. But man, Minnesota retooled offensive line. We've seen what KOC has done for guys like Darnold and obviously Kirk Cousins, even Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins over these last few years, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and maybe even a more decent run game than we're used to seeing as well. So fantastic situation. We love everything about the scheme. And with McCarthy, again, a lot of prospect who maybe we also shouldn't be completely counting out on the ground as well. Was reportedly running a sub 4.5 at Michigan before last year's knee injury, had the sixth fastest 3 count at the NFL Combine, actually averaged 9.3 yards per scramble at Michigan, a higher number than guys like Jalen Milroe, Drake May himself, and even Caleb Williams. So again, a situation where he is going a little bit higher than someone like Richardson. So I'll give Freedman some love there. But man, Dwain, like when we are actually going through this, if JJ McCarthy was our QB1 for our redraft team, I wouldn't completely hate that, man. We need to take a second one, but I do think McCarthy falls in that line where I can live with that.
Well, I think McCarthy, May, all these guys, it's actually fine to pair them. It depends on how many roster spots you have. I will say I was of the mind 2 or 3 years ago that you just don't draft 2 quarterbacks. But the way drafters are now handling drafts has changed. Like even in the high stakes streets where most people would just draft 1, everyone's drafting 2 now. And it's a trend, Ian, you and I have noticed over the last couple of years. So especially if you don't have a Jalen Hurts, you don't have a Jaden Daniels, you don't have a Josh Allen, with those teams, I think you can still find it. Just go with your 1 quarterback, work the waiver wire. But whenever you're drafting, someone that doesn't have that name, I think it's very much okay to take 2 guys to take a shot, because McCarthy is an example of another guy that gives you upside. Drake May is a guy that gives you upside. I wouldn't mind drafting them both. They go like 3 rounds apart from one another. So you could go with May and McCarthy. You're not saying you know for sure which one is going to do it, but you like things about both of them. So I think it's a situation where I don't mind having 2 shots at someone really having a great season that helps me offset the person that drafted Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts earlier in the draft, because I do think it's really tough if you're going to try to thread the needle and say, oh, I know exactly which guy it's going to be. It's going to be Jordan Love. It could be Jordan Love. Like Jordan Love is a candidate as well. Mm-hmm. But it's really tough to say that you know that for sure. So I kind of like the idea of taking 2 of these guys, especially in leagues where you get to draft 20 people. So when you talk about real-time sports, guys, you can check out the Fantasy Life Plus, the Fantasy Life contest over there. Ian and I have been drafting already. It's 20 rounds. So if you don't get one of the top guys, I'm very much okay with taking 2, and I want them to be in the vein of the guys we're talking about. We saw another drafter last night take a similar path, Ian, and we actually kind of liked it. He did something similar to what we talked about. I don't remember if Drake May was his first or J.J. McCarthy. I feel like he had one of those 2 guys, and then maybe it was a Love or a Stroud. And then he took Anthony Richardson in the next to the last round. And he's just basically saying, okay, between these threes, I get a chance that one of them blows up. Like, I'm going to just keep two of them. I'll cut the guy that's not doing anything, and I'll pick something else up. I didn't hate it.
McCarthy, I tried to be the highest fantasy life ranker on my QB 17. Freedman, you beat me. QB 16. Touche.
I like him. I mean, I would have picked him if you hadn't. And Ian, to your point, I'm fine, absolutely fine waiting on quarterback and having JJ McCarthy as the guy that I plan to start. I mean, Kevin, everything that you said was right. Kevin O'Connell, I think, is a very underappreciated quarterback whisperer and play caller. And the surrounding talent that McCarthy steps into is, if not the best in the league, certainly top three in terms of the skill position players around him. And then there's just the talent that McCarthy has on his own. Top 10 pick, like quote unquote, winning makeup, won national championship in high school, won a national championship in college. People will be like, oh, he's sort of sneaky athletic. Like, no, he's like legitimately athletic. And whenever they needed him to throw the ball at Michigan, which he wasn't called upon to do all that often, but when they needed him to throw the ball, he did it well. So 100% with you. I very much like JJ McCarthy. And I'm just like, I'm annoyed that Thor has cornered the market on JJ McCarthy enthusiasm. Okay. I like JJ McCarthy too. We all like JJ McCarthy, Thor.
If we could just clip, guys, that one part where Freedman said everything I said was right for the future, that would be fantastic. But yes, JJ McCarthy, Drake May, Anthony Richardson, 3 sleepers. Our Fantasy Life team is very keen on drafting throughout 2025. More running back sleepers next, though. First word, a quick word to our friends over to Renegade Fantasy. Fantasy football players, aren't you done watching your season crumble because of injuries or underperforming players? Well, welcome to Renegade Fantasy Football, the only app that lets you substitute players in real time. No more losing Sundays, no more lost points, no more could have won if. With Renegade, you're not just a GM, you are the coach. Call the shots, make the moves, win your league, step out of the luxury box and onto the field. This is fantasy football without limits. This is Renegade Fantasy. You can join the Fantasy Life League today at fantasylife.renegadefantasy.com. Running back sleepers, Dwain, you're kicking off with a guy who is probably going to be the 1B in his own backfield. But as you said last night, you find yourself being actually more willing to draft him than the starter straight up. Talk about Tennessee Titans RB Tyjae Spears.
Yeah, this is a guy that you can get in round 11 in your drafts based on consensus ADP. But he just checks some boxes here, and this is some boxes. And this is kind of a teaser. Freedman and I are actually going to be kicking off a new show tomorrow, Ian, known as Talk Data to Me. We might even have a cool intro song for you guys, but it's really going to be data intensive about, hey, how do we identify the traits that help, running backs break out? All these sort of things we love to talk about, draft strategy. We'll have different people hopping on with me. Tomorrow will be the first show, but one of the guys, as we were going back and forth getting prepared for the show that I had already mentioned was Tyjae Spears. And if you look at him, to your point, right now, Tony Pollard going multiple rounds ahead of him. But if you look at Tyjae Spears, mostly battling injuries last year, but he checks some of the boxes that we want. And he has shown that he can be a target earner in each of his first 2 seasons. He's actually got some size. I think people think of Tyjae Spears when they think he's like this 185-pound back. He's not. He's thicker than that. He had a 14% target share to finish out the season once he did take over as a starter whenever Tony Pollard was battling some things. Even bigger point, he had 20.7 fantasy points per game over that stretch. We also have a team where it's basically Calvin Ridley and we don't know who else is going to be catching balls. So it could very easily be the running backs getting a lot of passes in this offense. So 13% of his rushing attempts went for 10 plus yards as a rookie. Last year it was 11%, battling with some injuries. So explosive playmaker, can work in the passing downs, has the size to probably be more of a 3-down back than a lot of people think. And then the one other factor is just really the Tony Pollard, man. Like, he's fallen off since the tightrope surgery. Like, we really hate to see it, but given 2 full-time roles, he scored 13.1 and 12.7 fantasy points per game in those seasons. And if you look at his ability as a passer, as a receiver, man, it has absolutely fallen off the cliff. Before the tightrope surgery, 2.01 yards per route run, 1.51 yards per route run. Since then, 0.78 and 0.79. So something going on with Mr. Pollard. It might not just be tightrope. He also was battling injuries last year. And I think that's the one last caveat I'll say here is this coaching staff has told us they want to see this as a more even split. We've just never seen them healthy enough together to know for sure what the split might look like. So I think there's a potential run out where it's actually Tajay Spears as the lead back over Tony Pollard. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but for given how much further he goes behind Tony Pollard, I really like it. And I think the contingent value is through the roof. If something happens to Pollard and he misses 4 or 5 games, we've already seen what Spears can do for your fantasy lineup.
Dwain mentioned that explosive pass catching archetype here, and that's what we've seen, guys. I mean, these are the only running backs to actually catch at least 50 passes in the season while averaging 4.5 yards per carry. Aaron Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Jaylen Warren, yes, Tajay Spears as well. And one more who you want to mention here, Freedman, Mr. Austin Eckler. What a full circle moment here, because obviously for years I have been mistakenly drafting Jaylen Warren time and time again, and I'm doing it again this year as well, guys. When will I learn? Not in 2025. But Freeman, it's like for years, Jaylen Warren was this cheaper version of Austin Eckler. Now here we are in 2025. Maybe Austin Eckler is a cheaper version of Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, Austin Eckler, I think, falls into, as you mentioned, like that class of pass catching backs who are actually better than you might think running the football, and they don't get all that much work in the rushing game, but they get enough. And I would say Eckler, what he did last year, he finished as the RB 36 in points per game. Like, he's a flexible option every time you have to play. And then there's the upside of, well, what happens if Brian Robinson gets hurt? And I will say, thinking of some camp hype earlier, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the 7th rounder, has gotten some hype, but I don't think he's much of a threat to Austin Eckler. I think he's more of a threat to Brian Robinson. So even if Ja'Cory actually does end up getting a bigger role in the offense, I think Eckler's kind of built-in role as the pass-catching back and change-of-pace runner in this offense, I think his role is probably still intact. And last year, he saw a bounce back in efficiency. I know the final year that we saw with him in Los Angeles with the Chargers, that wasn't his best season, but he was dealing with an injury off and on throughout that season. Last year, he had a return to form. He had 4.8 yards per attempt on the ground, 8.9 yards per target. Like, I'm not going to say he was basically the old Austin Eckler of like 2020 and 2021, but like, he was holding his own. So I think given the role that he has, given the offense that he's in, that's the big thing. They have offensive continuity. They still have their play caller. Jaden Daniels entering his 2nd year. Like, what if that offense actually gets better? So Austin Eckler as a locked-in role player in that offense who has a really high floor and could have more of a ceiling if he's able to take over just a little bit more of the rushing workload. And I will say he also has the additional out of, even though he's like kind of like on the smaller side, he's actually a really good goal line back. So if somehow it ends up working out to where it's like, hey, Austin Eckler's getting a little more work at the goal line than we expect, then it's like, wait a minute, he's getting all of the passing workload as the like pass catching back, and then he's getting some of the goal line work. At that point, it's like, wait a minute, he's like a low-end RB2. So I'm just saying there are like significant ways in which Eckler could outperform expectations.
Let's talk about Brian Robinson, actually, as one of my favorite picks, I believe, in round 9 of fantasy football drafts. And one of the main points there was just similar to that kind of goal line idea. Washington and Kansas City are the only 2 top 10 projected scoring offenses that don't have an expensive running back attached. So, yes, as much as I like Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, same thing. And, man, the way you just see him priced, he's next to Tyler Algiers, the Trey Bensons of the world, who are literally there purely for handcuff purposes. To Freedman's point, Eckler actually could give you a little bit of flex value. In addition to that typical sky high upside, God forbid something happens to be Rob. So good call out there. I'm going to go with a guy who I cannot stop mentioning on the show, and I'm not going to stop mentioning him, Mr. Jalen Wright, Dolphins RB2. Maybe he's RB3 and more of a pure handcuff. Either way, he is way too freaking cheap in fantasy drafts, people. Easily my most drafted running back and overall player of this offseason, and cannot wait to keep on going down this hole. What could go wrong, everyone? But yeah, look, when we have this offense, obviously Raheem Mostert out of the picture, receiver. And yeah, only have to go back 2 years ago to find that man scoring 20 freaking touchdowns while Devon Achane was simultaneously putting up a top 6 season in PPR points per game. So yes, Achane is the lead back there, but as we even saw last year, not someone who's going to be pushing for more than 200 carries. There does seem like there's going to be legit potential standalone value for Wright as a complement to Achane on early downs. And God forbid something happens to that pint-sized speedster, all of a sudden Wright is the lead back for this ever-explosive Mike McDaniels Dolphins offense. So I'm feeling great about Wright. I have him as my RB42, which is well above consensus. I got Charge seeing Charge as RB43, and I know how wild Charge can get with his rankings, which I appreciate, but it does make me hesitate for a second. Dwain, you have him RB52. Freedman, RB56. Explain yourself, you freaking wet blanket.
I think Devon Achane is really good and is going to get a lot of the work. That's basically the answer. And I think he stays healthy. That's the answer.
Whatever. No one asked. I know I asked, so it's all good. But Jalen Wright, everyone, take him ahead of Austin Eckler, or not. I think they're both great picks. So again, top 3 RB sleepers: Tajay Spears, Austin Eckler, Jalen Wright. Great day to be great over there. We got some wide receiver sleepers coming up next. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Yahoo Fantasy. This episode is presented in part by Yahoo Fantasy, and this year I am Ian Hartitz, and I am playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran in your millionth league. Look, guys, the cool thing about Yahoo Fantasy, I've been using it for my home league for years, and unfortunately, even though we have our leagues uploaded, my friends have tried to say that I have an unfair advantage because I do this for a living and that I always get the best players in the waiver wire and all this nonsense that 7 out of 8 people in our league agree with, but I obviously don't. Either way, Yahoo gives you all those customizable league options. You can have it controlled waiver wire. You can have it wide open. You can do pretty much anything you want over at Yahoo Fantasy. And they've been doing this for 28 glorious years. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. You can stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy league over at yahoofantasy.com/fantasylife. Again, that's yahoofantasy.com/fantasylife. Time for some wide receiver sleepers here on the Fantasy Life Show. And I will caveat this with, okay, guys, we've talked about it. Usually prefer to be taking some late round running backs, even quarterback and tight end over these wide receivers. For every Puka Nacua, there's going to be freaking 20 or 30 other guys that don't really do a dang thing. And when you are looking at just the replaceability factor of the position, much, much harder to project similar targets for, a backup wide receiver coming to the starting lineup versus other positions. So with all that said, Dwain, there does happen to be a first-round wide receiver and a passing game we like that probably will be starting from day one. Talk about the Ohio State University's Emeka Egbuka and why he's your favorite sleeper ahead of 2025.
Yeah, he's my most drafted wide receiver through 70 drafts, over 30% exposure to Emeka Egbuka. And honestly, I don't know how much longer I'll get to keep doing it because the news around Chris Godwin with the ankle and the fact that he hasn't practiced yet, I think we're about to see them flip. I will say this, though. Looking at the ADP tool over on Fantasy Life, you guys can check that out. If you look at consensus ADP, the thing that's essentially, this is kind of cheating. He's picked 118. So if we're in a 12-team league and we're talking about it has to be round 10 or later, technically Egbuka's like he doesn't qualify, but it's really underdog that's shooting him way up where he's like moved to like pick 80 over on underdog. And all these other rooms, you can still get Emeka Egbuka, so for you guys playing over on Yahoo, you guys playing on ESPN, he's not near as expensive as what you're seeing over on underdog. So when I look at Egbuka, I just think he's a very talented player. Ian, obviously, I know you'll support me on that. Ohio State, obviously the camp buzz has been really good. I think they might be fitting this guy for a Hall of Fame jacket tonight before the game of just looking at the camp hype alone, but it lines up with what we saw from him in college. He played with Jackson Smith and Jigba. He played with Garrett Wilson, played with Marvin Harrison Jr., played with all of these really good weapons at Ohio State. And did he ever completely dominate the passing game? No, but he was still dominant. He was still good, and he was good every year, and he broke out at a young age. So the rookie supermodel really liked him. We've got an offense that, we've got some questions about. Left tackle Tristan Wirfs might not start the season, could miss 4 games. But I think overall, you're going to see plenty of 11 personnel, even if Chris Godwin's back. The other out here is Mike Evans. We don't want injuries, but he's 32. Like at some point, Mike Evans can't Mike Evans. So there's a lot of different ways that it works out for Godwin. I mean, for Egbuka here, it could be to do with Godwin, it could be to do with Mike Evans, or it could be to do with Egbuka's been so good in the preseason that they just decide, hey, we're just going to play 3 wide receivers 85% of the time because why not? Like, he's one of our best players. He's also a good blocker in the run game. So it's not like he's a complete liability if you use him out there in that kind of way. I will say, the flip side to this is Godwin is falling in drafts, and not just around the injury. If Egbuka's going to be a really good player, it does kind of hamper the upside for Godwin and Evans as well. Like if he suddenly gets an 18-20% target share, we're not going to see those two guys get 25% each like we saw at different times of the year last year. So just another thing to keep in mind, Egbuka's been the guy I've drafted the most from the Bucs.
I guess the one thing that's confused me is if there was this much uncertainty going around McGovern's recovery, what's Tampa Bay doing signing him to the 3 years, $66 million deal with $44 million guaranteed? And we had the rumors about the Patriots basically giving the dude a blank check out here. So I'm with you. There are a lot of outs here. Mike Evans, I mean, look at him. He's old. The man is old out here, okay? So certainly I can see the path to upside for Emeka Egbuka.
Probably going to be a wide receiver Freedman, 5.
Yeah, I mean,
he'll be the
Freedman,
wide receiver 5 overall.
Do you get some Rome Odunze vibes here? That's my only concern. I'm not even talking about like Odunze being
or JSN
prospect,
vibes.
But
JSN went through the same
exactly.
issue.
Freeman, you had the number 1 big board at Huddle. You had number 3 mock drafts. Like thoughts on Egbuka maybe being able to break out of a crowded situation?
I love Egbuka. This is a great call. If Dwain wouldn't have picked him, I would have picked him for all the reasons that Dwain said, so many ways in which it could work out for him. And the fact that just think about kind of the archetypes, you've had so many round 1 wide receivers who were athletic and who were productive, who end up being drafted in, the 2nd or 3rd rounds of fantasy drafts. And here we have that available at wide receiver 50. You have to take a shot on that and believe that at some point the talent is good enough to win out. And then you can see the path for how it happens with the injury to Godwin. Again, Evans being old, and the fact that the offense could just also be really good.
Speaking of old men, Freedman, you sprinted to the keyboard to put this sleeper in. Apparently didn't have enough time for Egbuka or my sleeper to be named Adam Thielen in the year 2025. Explain yourself, the Oracle.
Are we forgetting that Adam Thielen, I mean, he still might be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous given that the Panthers just drafted a 1st-round wide receiver, but guys, didn't they just the year before also draft a 1st-round wide receiver and Adam Thielen still beat that guy? Like, I'm not going to say, oh, hey, T-Mac is basically just this year's version of Xavier Legette, but like, why not? Like that's within the range of outcomes. It happens all the time. Just think of like Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. It happens all the time that a wide receiver is drafted highly and then just kind of doesn't really work out. And Adam Thielen has actually looked pretty good the past couple of years. Like it feels dirty to say that, but like just 2 years ago, he was actually like the number 1 wide receiver on this team and had 1,000 yards receiving. And then last year, he missed 7 games, but he ended up having more yards per game than the previous year when he was 1,000-yard receiver. In his 2 seasons with the Panthers, he's actually kind of looked good with like 8.2 yards per target. Like he's been an efficient player. I'm not saying, oh, he's basically like the Adam Thielen from the Vikings, like where we remember him having like 1,200 yards on the reg, but he's actually still like a competent guy. And he's going, what is it? Wide receiver 64? Like he's not going to finish wide receiver 64. He's either
Freeman,
going to
realize
dead.
Sleeper means like an upside pick late, not literally guys that probably go to sleep early because they're old. Like they're not literally sleeping more often in the day because they're old. These are actually players that you're trying to recommend that fantasy drafters want to take. And I can't wait until I hear your next one because you're going to keep the theme going of these are the early to bed sleepers. That
some of these old guys will outproduce. And I'm just saying, Adam Thielen, like he's just being totally written off because of T-Mac. And it's like, that's fine, but that's a rookie who's highly unproven and also like really wasn't a perfect prospect. So if Thielen ended up being again the number one wide receiver in this offense, would anyone be surprised? Like, should anyone be surprised if that happened? It is well within the range of outcomes.
Be very surprised if it happened. I will give you credit for the double entendre sleeper. I think that's the right word for it. But I do have to share a pretty crazy stat that does back up some of Freedman's points, okay? PPR points per game over these last 2 seasons. Adam Thielen has outscored the following wide receivers: Garrett Wilson, Jordan Addison, Brandon Ayuk, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Cortland Sutton, Chris Olave, Calvin Ridley, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, George Pickens, Jalen Waddle, and Jackson Smith in the Jigba. Adam Thielen in the years 2023 and 2024, more productive than them all. So I'm out on everything Freedman said. Otherwise, don't get me wrong, but you guys could imagine, I guess. We'll get to his next old man here in a few minutes. I'll close out, though, with my favorite sleeper and also Cooter Doodle. So if you guys don't want to take my word for it, you can certainly take hers. Rashid Shaheed, the wide receiver 1 in yards per target since 2022, had 4 top 18 PPR finishes last year in 6 freaking games, people. That was more than guys like Jalen Waddle, George Pickens, and DK Metcalf had all season long. Just throwing so many strays at those guys right now. Gotta love it. So I think similar to Chris Olave, okay, we are checking the talent box. We are checking the age box. We are checking the volume box. He is one of actually only 7 wide receivers that Fantasy Life projections have seeing 90-plus targets despite not being in the position's top 50. The big problem, again, is Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, Jake Hayner, whatever sacks used for a quarterback the Saints are going to be trotting out there under center. So again, with Shaheed, it is a situation where you need the quarterback situation to hopefully be right. But Dwain, I saw your, eyes perk up last night when we were actually kind of just in the draft and saw how late Rashid Shaheed went. When you are trying to go that late at a wide receiver, Rashid Shaheed should be one of your top targets.
Yeah, absolutely. For all the reasons that you mentioned, when he's been given his opportunities, period, throughout his career, he's been good. Last year, we saw him as a starter continue to do that. So I think there's also a lot of different ways that Kellen Moore could use him in this offense. It doesn't have to be all deep stuff. The guy had a huge ADOT and also a big target share, which is really hard to do. So I think he's a guy you can get more involved around the line of scrimmage. You can run him more on that intermediate short stuff, let him run after the catch. So, and you also have a talent and Olave to the opposite side that can demand some coverage. So I think that they're a good combination, the two of those players. Now, the big question here is, what do we get at quarterback? We were kind of hoping it was going to be, Tyler Shuck. Sounds like he's not able to even separate really right now from Spencer Rattler and is it Jake Hayner? Is that the other guy that we're talking about here? So that's a little bit disappointing. Was hoping to hear that the second round pick, great write-up by Freedman this morning. If you guys haven't seen it, talking about all of his training camp tidbits, I saw that was one of the things you had in there, Freedman. You did not get an aw shucks in, though. You're the guy that's come up with aw shucks. You did not get that in there. But that's the one worry. But man, talent and where he goes, Ian. What he going around 13 last night of our real-time sports draft? Yes, absolutely. I sign me up for Shaheed at that price tag.
Fingers crossed, Shuck it Shaheed down there somewhere. That'd be a good team name, too, if you are brave enough to actually roster Tyler Shuck. I would not recommend that, though. Guys, time for quarter 4, sleeper tight ends. Quarter 4 here on the Fantasy Life Show. Get those 4s up. I'm talking to Dwain Freedman and even you at home. I don't care. Get that 4 up. I do. Oh my God, guys. Last year I was watching a football game. There's a fumble. I yelled ball. There was a football on the ground. And my wife had the audacity to shush me in my own house. I will not stand for that. So love you, honey. If you're listening to this, she's not. So it's all good. But anyway, sleeper tight end, guys. Dwain, Tyler Warren, someone we drafted last night. You've convinced me. Now convince the people.
Yeah, my most drafted tight end. And I get it, guys. It's scary. It's kind of gross. We just talked about Anthony Richardson earlier, and there's some challenges there. And if the silver lining that you're looking to is it could be Daniel Jones, that's also scary, to be honest. So I totally get it. Also a team that likes to run the ball quite a bit. And Freedman talked about all the other weapons they had with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs. These are guys that can, they've earned targets historically over the last 2 seasons. But here's the thing. Last year, going into the season, how did you feel about Brock Bowers playing with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers with the crappy quarterbacks they had? With Gardner Minshew and who's the other guy? I can't even think of his name, but he's got the great mustache. Aiden O'Connell. Love the mustache, man. Keep rocking that mustache. But the point being is, I do this for a living, and I forgot his name. Like, so that's not an ideal quarterback situation either. And what ultimately happened, you just have to, at these ranges of the draft, it's the same thing that Freedman said around Agbuka. Even though the situation may not be ideal, talent is the trump card. And we're talking about a guy that the Colts just spent the 14th pick on. I've heard people come back, man, they rotate their tight ends. Yeah, because they've had guys that can either A, block with stone hands, or guys that can't block anything that are really receivers, like a Kylan Granson or a Mo Alley Cox. Like, guys, those are two total different players are used for totally different reasons. I think Tyler Warren's coming in. He's going to immediately take over the starting role, not just because of the draft capital, but because he's really a blend of those things. And one final thing I'll say here is the way that you get Tyler Warren the ball is around the line of scrimmage. And that's how he was a beast in college. I think they have a plan for him. If you look at Shane Steichen in his 2 years calling plays for the Colts, no other offensive coordinator has used the RPO more. And you can do that whether you have Anthony Richardson or whether you have Daniel Jones under center. And a lot of those are short passes. So I do think he gobbles a lot of those up. That creates space for a guy like what we have with Tyler Warren, who can run after the catch. And then the other thing is 28% of their dropbacks have had play action. That's fourth in the league with Steichen. That's another thing that creates space for these tight ends, guys. If you go back and look at the boost and fantasy points you get per route run with tight ends using play action, it's significant. So I think the scheme's a really good fit. And one last thing that my co-host here, Ian Hartitz, taught me, and he brought it up a while back, which was when you look at these underneath targets, it doesn't impact them as much with the lack of accuracy. So I was like, Ian's pretty smart. I'm going to go look this up. 65% completion rate, passes 1 to 9 yards if it is Anthony Richardson. Now, don't get me wrong. That's below the NFL average of 70%. The 65% is not terrible. And if you look at behind the line of scrimmage passes, which the Colts also like to do, can also be part of the RPO game, 90%. So I think a lot of the targets we're talking about here for Tyler Warren not necessarily going to be impacted as much. I think there's a chance that he leads the team in targets just because you can manufacture so much of it for him and you can keep it in a range where you can still have Anthony Richardson. Even Anthony Richardson can complete a pass to this guy.
I was about to say, Dwain, those percentages shocked me that they actually were that high. I'm going to do a Twitter poll and just ask people what they actually think Richardson's completion percentage is that shallow. I guarantee you will not be actually what it was. So stay tuned for that one. Again, guys, go and pick 134 on ESPN right now. One of the better late round values you can get at the position. Or you could actually go ahead and try to get the reigning tight end 10 in PPR points per game. Yeah, he might be 46 years old at this point. But Freedman, talk about your favorite tight end sleeper, Mr. Zach Ertz.
Okay. I want Dwain to tell me where I am wrong. All right. I'm going to walk through the projections. And by the way, Dwain does projections. I do projections. You can find the projections on the site. Of course, use the promo code Freedman. Nailed it again for 20% off to see the projections there. So I might be a little bit higher on the Washington offense than you are in general. So maybe that would account for the difference where I'm just a little bit higher on Ertz as a result. But okay, Ertz, in the 3 years before this current season, 81% route rate, 77% route rate last year. I have him at 75%. Do you think that is reasonable?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think he's more of a floor play. But to your point, where he goes, he's fine. All these guys have AARP
yes or no, Dwain
cards. Like these are not upside plays. Okay. So that's fine.
Yes,
he said yes. You're giving someone that you can just start and not like it.
Can we mute Dwain
and hate yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So Dwain, 17% target per route rate. That's what he's had the last 3 years. That's what he had last year. That's what I'm giving him this year. Yes or no? Is that fine?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. After that, we look at the completion percentage. 74% is what he had last year. Sorry. It's what he's had the past 3 years. I'm giving him 74% catch rate. Is that fine?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. So after that, I'm giving him 9.3 yards per catch. That's what he's had the past 3 years. In the automated system that you have, it actually suggested bumping him up to 9.7, but I kept him at 9.3. 9.3 yards per catch. Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay. After that, 24% touchdown share. That's what he had last year. Over the past 3 years, he's had a 32% touchdown share. So 24%. Do you think that's fine?
Probably not. Probably
okay,
not.
You think
not
that's a little bit too high?
I think that's high if you have Debo added to the offense. This is also assuming that McLaurin plays. Like if McLaurin doesn't play, then I would be fine, with the touchdown share that you have.
Okay, so I gave him what he had last year, and it's less than what he's had the past 3 years. Maybe it's a little bit high, but you put all that together, that's projected as the tight end 11, which is very much in line with what he did last year, and that Washington offense might be better this year. Like it's a quote unquote floor play in that like he's not going to be the tight end 3, but who probably is going to be the tight end 3 when he's drafted as a tight end 21. If you can get a guy who like won't kill you as the tight end 21, who will actually be on that borderline of like low end tight end 1, like that's reasonable. And by the way, again, I had to pick Ertz because you guys had already picked the tight ends I wanted. So I'm defending Ertz, but I think it's reasonable based on the projection process.
So the guys you name are guys I'm fine taking if I take upside players earlier in the draft. 2 years ago, Mr. Hartitz here would not let me draft Adam Thielen because he was old. And I told him, I said, look, this dude's going to be good for us for the first 5 or 6 weeks. He did end up doing that. So, Mr. Ian trying to hush me, I think it comes down to the strategy. But like, I'm not going into my drafts wanting to draft Zach Ertz. I will say he pairs well with a player like Tyler Warren. That could start slow, and you're like, okay, I don't have to drop Tyler Warren from my roster if he's playing 60% route rate over the first 3 weeks. I could just start Zach Ertz, right? And I can start him until Tyler Warren really takes over the full-time role and starts to score the fantasy points. So a lot of it, I'm giving you a hard time. A lot of it does come back to the strategy, and I'm just thinking more about upside with some of these sleepers. But depending on the way you've drafted your teams, to your point, like these guys can play a role in how you construct your roster.
The year is 2041, and Dwain is still yelling at me for not letting him draft Adam Thielen that one time. I already apologized to you, Dwain. Please let it go. But
I got to go back to the year before, and it was Nico Collins who went bananas. But I'm not keeping track of all these things anywhere.
My tight end sleeper, Jake Ferguson, to close things out, guys. Look, it's a situation. We love the Cowboys passing game. Dak has thrown at least 30 touchdowns each of his last 3 seasons with 16-plus starts. We were all drafting Jake Ferguson as a top 10 tight end this time last year. What has changed? Okay, we added George Pickens, but we also gave Ferguson $52 million over the course of these next few years. If you guys are like me and believe the Cowboys could be vying for the league lead in pass attempts, seems like there'll be more than enough volume in an offense that we believe in to enable someone like ASAP Ferguson pretty solid heights. If you go into your local dictionary, if people still have those actual in copies, if you go to touchdown regression, they actually have Jake Ferguson's picture there because he had 86 targets without a single score last season. That was the highest mark in the NFL. Jake Ferguson, take him over Zach Ertz, take him over Tyler Warren. Just kidding, don't actually do that, but I still like my sleeper pick, and that accordingly is going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show.
He could very easily do that. He could very easily.
It could happen. We'll see if it does happen. I don't know if he's going to outscore 2023 Adam Thielen. Dwain will be sure to remind us if that is the case, though. So
you hope he does.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, though, either way. For Dwain, for Matthew, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.